Welcome back to Synergy Bonus, a bunch of guys that like to sit and drink and talk about games. Tonight we're going to be taking a bash at a bit of a cult classic on the N64. And I say taking a bash because he hasn't played it. It's been at least 15 years since I've played it. And that Shy But Deadly hit us pretty damn hard.
Indeed. This is... Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually refined it a little bit, so...
It's still more of a him drink than a me drink, but yeah, it's
Yeah, it only got better. Only got better.
It'll modifications in the thing below. Never mind, that's a different video. Anyhow, today we are talking about Aidyn Chronicles, the first mage, one of the very few RPG titles for the Nintendo 64.
I had only heard of this in passing. It wasn't actually until I met Trav that I got to play this game, and I did play this game very briefly.
Very briefly, and not even close to...
I did the first combat. I'm like, I'll come back to this. Never did.
This is easily a 30-hour game, which doesn't sound like much from the era of,
Final Fantasy
VII. But when you remember the technical limitations of the N64, that's a lot of hours of gameplay, regardless of grinding.
Right. Real quick, based on this, what did this require the expansion pack for
Yes.
Okay, so it was one of the games that required the expansion pack
And it was
to boost the graphics.
compatible with the Rumble Pack, too. Yeah, and even with the boosted graphics, these are some of the strangest polygons I've ever seen. This game has not aged well, as you can see on the screen here. It's still interesting to look at.
I have to wonder what the upscaler would do for this for the N64. That'd be something to see.
So this was developed by H2O Entertainment and produced by THQ, and hopefully had nothing to do with them going bankrupt 13 years later.
THQ made like bomb-ass wrestling games.
Among other things.
I can't really think of the other things. Okay.
I'm sure there'll be a quick list here in a minute.
But an RPG it's weird.
Yeah. Well, like THQ did Bug and Bug 2. No?
Nope.
Nothing?
Nope.
This was originally released in March of 2001, so it was actually a gift to myself for my graduating high school, now that I've dated myself.
You know what mine was? Eternal Darkness.
I think you made the better choice.
I did make the better choice.
I'm not going to judge.
Which came out a year later.
I am a fan of this game, despite the fact that it's got really middling to low reviews by most of the professional reviewers.
Wait a second. You just said this came out in 2001?
Yep.
And the GameCube was already...
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And had they chosen the GameCube, or had they gone ahead with the PlayStation or something like that, this would probably be one of those games that gets mentioned in the same sort of conversations as Dragon Warrior or Ogre Battle or something like that. It's not a mainline RPG like Final Fantasy, but definitely a second line that people have heard of. Unfortunately, the technical limitations of the N64 prevented it from realizing its full potential, and so it's been relegated to cult classic. The game was written by Chris Klug, again of Dragon Quest fame, so there's that. It's got a good pedigree behind it. He was deliberately asked to write a RPG for the N64, something to compete with Final Fantasy VII.
And the craziest thing is like Final Fantasy VII was like 97. Xenogears, I think, was 98. You had Parasite Eve. All these Square hard hitters several years earlier.
And then Nintendo goes, we can do that too. Aidyn Chronicles.
I thought Quest 64, but...
If you're being generous.
I'm being generous.
Person of lordly caliber. I hesitate to bring that up without Greg here to gush over it, but... Anyhow. So yeah, this is a pretty basic, standard fantasy RPG. It's a little darker than some. There's a lot of stab you in the back fuckery going on here.
When you were explaining this to me, you said there's 3 different paths?
There are 3 that I'm aware of. There may be more.
But you made it sound interesting. Like, that's the thing. It sounds interesting.
There's a lot of really good ideas.
On paper.
On paper. And again, I'm saying this with love. I'm actually a fan of this game. I love this game. But I will admit, especially as an adult, that it has its weaknesses. The graphics, chief among them. They have not aged well, but then again, neither has the N64 on the whole.
Right. And graphics don't always make the gameplay. I mean...
Mm-hmm. Gameplay makes the gameplay.
Exactly.
Which brings us to things. It's broken down into basically 2 segments. You've got overworld exploration, which is a very early example of sandboxiness. There's a straight path that you can take through the game, following roads and so on, that'll take you straight town to town. This is not the way to get the good ending. You really want to explore off the beaten path because, 1, that's where you find your random encounters where you're going to level up. Because it's not just invisible monsters on the map like you would expect in Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, etc., etc. There's actual monsters wandering around on the map, and when you encounter them...
makes it easier to farm and whatnot.
Or easier to avoid them if you aren't aware that farming monsters is an important thing in something that's a proto-JRPG.
True. Oh my god, the Shy But Deadly is hitting me. Continue.
I will do my best. And periodically throughout the game, you'll encounter things like campsites or events, or even just a random conversation with the party members, depending on who you have active in the party at the time, that fill up the journal and sort of become your memories. These become important later in the game for much the same reason that memories are important in the Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles.
That's what I was going to say. It's very, very similar.
In that it sort of defines how the ending goes and who your character becomes at the end when he gets his true name, which brings us to the crux of the game. This is a setting based around everybody having 2 names, their common use name and their true name, which really defines who they are. And your character, by default, it's Aileron, but you can name him whatever you want.
Something that's kind of gone away in most RPGs nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, we have it in the current Fire Emblem thing where, actually every Fire Emblem where the main character has a name, but that's another video for another time. This one's going to run long, I can tell.
That's fine.
He's out initially the tutorial dungeon. You're wandering the forest trying to find a lost farmer because his wife has come and asked you to. A little backstory, your character is an orphan who was adopted by the local king for reasons that are unclear to you, but it's given you a much better station in life than being an orphan out in the woods. And you've been apprenticed to a knight as a squire, and you've been permitted to study magic under the court wizard, which is something unusual for the squires, and so on. This is all to reflect the fact that your character is a blank slate. He can be whatever you want him to be, unlike the other characters in the game who are locked into certain classes and professions and decisions.
From what little bit I've played, it seems like everyone is kind of hostile towards him. Like, just...
A little bit. Your only real friend is the king obviously cares about you, and then the castle cook has been your appointed de facto guardian. And everybody else is kind of hostile.
This is like some Cory in the House bullshit.
Yeah. There are some roving traders that are this universe's version of dwarves. They're called Mirari. They're dwarves with an affinity for facial piercings, green skin, and Yoda's... Dialect, yes, that's a good word. They're kind of entertaining. And that's about it for everybody who likes you. Everybody else is a little bit hostile. You have a best friend who is also always in trouble, and you bonded over your mutual troublemaking ways because she's the party thief and rogue. And the second best thief and rogue in the game. So, this farmer is missing, and you go out in the woods for the tutorial dungeon. And at the end of the tutorial dungeon, you get jumped by goblins who stab you with a poisoned blade. You have a crazy Lovecraftian nightmare while you're delirious from the poison. And you come to in an herbalist, local witch in the woods hut. She tells you that she stabilized you, but the poison is beyond normal medicine's means to cure. And you are slowly dying. You report this back to the king, and he says, you know what, take a couple of people to travel with and go to the kingdom of the Mirari, because these little green dwarf dudes know about poisons, and they can probably help you out. So you do, RPG travel session with stuff along the way, as you do. You are instructed to take 2 party members, but if you don't take the thief, she will be offended because she's your best friend and first possible romance, and come charging out the castle gate behind you to join the party, even though she was told not to, because nobody tells her what to do. And yeah, she genuinely cares about you, which is unique in this game. You make it to the kingdom of the not dwarves, and Dwarf King's like, yeah, I can help you out. We know the cure to that poison, sure thing. But it's going to cost you. We want you to clear the goblins out of the mountains because they're becoming a real problem for our traders and merchants. And our guards are otherwise occupied guarding the city. Go see to it. You do. And here's your first big betrayal. You come back and... Oh, I didn't expect you to make it back. I don't actually know any of the things that you need to know.
Sorry, dog.
Sorry, dog. And he just kind of sends you on your way. His queen feels bad about this, and she approaches you after the fact and says that, well, you probably can find some answers down at the wizarding school in this nearby town on the other side of the mountains, which should be an easy trek since you've already cleared out the goblins. And you head down there. And now at the wizarding school, as they're trying to ascertain who should be allowed to enter and who should not based on their affinity and ability with magic, they ask everybody to announce their true name. In this universe, we've said there's the true name and there's the common name. Everybody is, when they're very young, as a sort of a baptism kind of thing, reconciled with their true name, and that lays out their path in life. Come to find out, you never thought of it before, but you don't know your true name, which they find interesting. And they let you into the school so you can talk to some people. And they don't have a cure for the poison.
I thought you were going to say they don't have a cure for the true name.
They don't have a cure for the poison, but they find out that you don't have a true name. You never underwent the ritual, which means you're, in universe, something referred to as a wilding. This means that you attract chaos wherever you go. And the sudden uptick in monster incursions, including the goblin attack that killed your friend the farmer and poisoned you, are probably due to the fact that you are a living portal to the plane of chaos and magic. Depending on... One of the more interesting aspects of the game is there's a mechanic where there's this wandering spirit who can be in various locations throughout the game, sort of generated randomly. You may have run into him 2 or 3 times on your way to any of these towns. He's actually, you find out late in the game, your true name that's gained sentience and wandered around and doesn't really like you either, because if you're reunited, he loses his sense of individuality and independence in his memories and just becomes a part of you. And he's decided that maybe if he kills you, he can take over the dead body and be the main personality.
That's some messed up thinking, but I love it.
Mm-hmm. And he automatically is many, many levels higher than you are. You can't even hurt him the first few times you encounter him. And that's sort of the thrust of the game. There's a lot of other things, like the School of Magic points you in a direction of a wizard who can help you with the true name ceremony as an adult, and stuff happens. There's a shipwreck and so on. You get there just in time to watch him get killed by monsters, and his dying wish is that you take him to get buried at this other town in the desert, where they show you another guy who didn't have a true name, who went insane and mute, and you've been having nightmares about this guy for a while as a prophetic warning, and it gets twisted and involved further and further. It is a game that likes twists and backstabs. There's a jester that you can recruit to your party early on who's far and away the best character in the game in terms of stat growth and conversation options, who's also the second to last boss. Spoiler for a 20-year-old game. And if he's in your party, he's leveled and equipped the way you leveled and equipped him.
It's like Gaff Gary in Final Fantasy Tactics.
Very similar.
Right at the waterfall.
Yeah.
And I doubt you can change this dude's job class before. And can you de-equip him at least before...
If you know it's coming.
Going in, okay. So if you know it's coming, you can sort of prepare.
It's sort of like Pink the Bruja in Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, except there's a fight here. He doesn't just mock you and walk away with all your stuff. Yeah, it can be a very rough fight if he's been in your party. If you've resisted the temptation to recruit him, then he goes down fairly easily, but it's still a long battle.
Going on fights and whatnot.
Yeah.
You said this is JRPG?
Ish.
JRPG-ish, okay. What's the combat like? What type of system is it?
Combat is very unique. It is turn-based, but there's real-time movement on your turn. When your turn is up, if you select move, this
like
mystical fence appears around you, very similar to Quest 64. We talked about that. And you can move freely within this sphere. And if it overlaps, where the various monsters or enemies are, then you can position yourself. So if you're the rogue, you can run around behind them and get in backstab attacks and so on.
This sounds very similar to the combat style of Parasite Eve. Mm-hmm. It also sounds very similar to the combat system in Kai Kingdom, which was a tactical RPG, and it ditched the grid-based system for a sphere-based system. Mm-hmm. And it's got that ring, like you said, so you can position yourself and so on and so forth.
There's basically 3 rings. There's the ring that is the arena. You can't go outside of that unless you're trying to run away. There is the ring that is your personal movement space, where you can move freely within that circle, but you can't move outside of it. And if there's terrain features in the way, you can't move through them, like up cliffs or through trees or what have you. And then there's the enemies with their own sphere that they can move about freely in, so you can position your mage perpetually just outside that ring and just
bang, bang, bang.
Basically, you can strafe with a mage, yes, or with the alchemist if you choose him. I wouldn't do that in your first playthrough. He's definitely the comic relief and a very interesting character, but his combat stats are abysmal. His big claim to fame is, as I said, he's an alchemist. He can mix stuff together that you find along the way and turn healing herbs into potions or high potions or what have you. But he also makes a lot of stuff that explodes, and it doesn't always explode intentionally. So sometimes in combat you'll be mixing up a heal or a high potion to heal the party, and instead the alchemist will blow up. Party death is permanent in this. If a character dies, they're done.
Okay,
you have to recruit somebody else.
It's along the lines of Fire Emblem per se, or in Final Fantasy Tactics, if you let the timer count down and they become a gem.
Similar, yeah. Except there's no gem, there's no resurrecting them. If somebody runs out of hit points, that's it. They're done. You're down a party member so you can get to town, to get to the inn. So
there is no option to revive.
Right. Okay. And party members don't travel with you from inn to inn. They have their own background stories that they're following. So some people, you get one chance to recruit them. Some people you'll run into periodically as they're having their own adventures and have the option to bring them in or out. If you leave somebody behind in favor of a new character, they will wait at the inn or place that you found the new character. So if you want to get them back, you have to run back to that town. And there's no fast travel in this game.
Fast travel is kind of a more recent thing, and it's a quality of life improvement, especially in RPGs.
Yeah.
It's like the airship.
Yeah. Thankfully, this game doesn't have any airships because it's a fantasy game.
Hey, I like airships, and airships to me are fantasy. So, moving on. So that's it. The controls are about as good as you could ask for the N64. They're very tight for what they are. They said overworld navigation isn't crazy, and the rest of it is menu selection. So. Overworld and whatnot. Is everything kind of streamlined together, or do you go to a world map and choose, hey, I'm going to move here, and then it goes
Everything is streamlined together. This is what I would call a proto sandbox game, where you have the option of running here and there, but some places, if you're going through a forest, it's got that N64 limitation where it's actually a maze with forest print on the walls. But if you're out on the plains or anything, you can go any direction you want, and some places will take you places and some places won't. That's one of the things where this game both succeeds and fails abysmally. It is massive in scope, bigger than anything on the N64 has any right to be, on multiple levels, because there's multiple planes of existence, the real world, the spirit world, and so on. But a lot of that is empty because the N64 didn't have capacity to put a treasure chest here, or a clue there, or an NPC here.
Which is unfortunate. That is also unfortunate. That is Extra unfortunate.
So if you get lost, like some of the early castles lend to this grand, massive emptiness. It's very easy to get lost in, just not even a hostile dungeon. This is just an inhabited castle full of humans. If you don't have a good sense of direction, this game is going to be very cruel to you.
Did they give you a compass at least?
Yep.
Okay.
You know which way's north. It's a literal compass, no map, no mini map.
Nice. How's that sound?
That's an interesting dichotomy. This game.
When I think RPGs, I think a stellar soundtrack, memorable songs.
This game has a stellar soundtrack that is not at all memorable, unfortunately. Like, even the battle music isn't something that's going to stick with you 5 years later, which is too bad because as you sit and listen to it, there's some really good pieces in here. But it also does something interesting. There's no overworld music. Music is cued and keyed for special events or special locations. Town music, castle music, combat music. But if you're just running through the woods, you're hearing the sound of your footsteps, the heavy breathing of the character if you're running instead of walking, the rain on the leaves if the weather happens to have come through at this point in time. This game has some primitive weather mechanics.
It's cool.
Maybe some bird song or something. If you're really listening, you can oftentimes hear monsters sneaking up on you from behind because the camera is fixed behind you. Notice the character is in the center of the screen.
It's a great feature. More games should have that.
So things like that, like you can sit by or stand by a campfire and, hear the crackling of the flames, but there may not be overworld music. It has a whole lot of other interesting ideas, like you recover more hit points and status effects by staying in an inn than if you camp out in the woods.
I've seen some other games do that, and that makes sense.
Yeah. But that's really considered more of a recent thing, and this was doing it back in 2001.
Think about this, too, like with the earlier Final Fantasies. A tent versus a cabin.
Yeah.
It's essentially like that.
Sort of. Yeah.
So... because you have a tent, you're roughing it, but you go to an inn, you have creature comforts, and you can relax a little bit more. So it makes sense that you recover more, or get more of a boon.
This is definitely a game that kind of subtly punishes min-maxers.
Greg would hate this.
Probably. All of the best characters in the game, the ones with the best stat growth, the ones with the most interesting personalities, and so on, are either incredibly fragile or will die tragic, heroic deaths that are scripted and unavoidable, depending upon the choices you make.
Don't level heirs.
Yeah, basically.
Except you don't know who the heir is until it happens.
Yeah.
Levitts.
We've already mentioned the Jester. There's a mage you get who's probably the best mage in the game, and he's cursed, slowly turning undead, and it first settled into his eyes, so he's blind, which is a neat feature. And all that, and because of that, his movement radius is significantly reduced, but he hits so hard it doesn't matter. And naturally, you get to the end of the shipwreck segment, where you first really encounter the Chaos Beast, and he tries to save his mentor, the wizard who's going to give you your true name, and he gets his eyesight back just in time to see a horrible tentacle death bearing down on him.
That's unfortunate.
Yep. You get a really good tank character, and he survives. He's got great survivability. He's kind of dumb, but because of that, he's really entertaining.
I was gonna say something and I just forgot it. No, it's not. It wasn't you. I'm pretty sure it was the.
Basically, you get two characters of each class. So there's 2 tanks, 2 rogues, 2 wizards.
I remembered that. So continue.
And then your main character, in keeping with the fact that he doesn't have a true name, is a blank slate. He lends himself best towards being an extra tank character, but he can go any route you want. You can equip him with daggers, and he can be a rogue. You can teach him more spells, and he can be a wizard. The only thing he doesn't really excel at is being an alchemist, like good old Godric.
Now, I guess that brings me to what I was going to say that I remember. Are the characters memorable? Like,
some of them really are.
Like, can you remember their names and whatnot? Because, I can think of RPGs that I played forever ago one time remember all the cast of characters.
Sure.
Does this have that, or?
I'm probably going to mangle these names an awful lot, but there's Sir Arcturus, the knight who you were the squire to. He's second best tank in the game, and he's going to be your first heavy hitter. And he really doesn't want to go on the quest with you to recover the poison. One, because he's annoyed with you. Two, because he has other duties and responsibilities that you're taking him away from, which makes him more annoyed with you. You've got Brienne, who's your childhood friend in the anime sense of it, who is your initial rogue. She's the one that I said, don't recruit because she'll follow you across the moat and make you have a party of 4. She's kind of witty, a little bit bitchy, and she wants to present herself as your rival rather than your love interest, but she is that in fact. You have, as I already mentioned, Godric the alchemist, who is very much the comic relief. He's an absent-minded mad scientist whose solution to pretty much everything is some form of volatile explosive. You have Rhea the mage, who again doesn't want to go with you because it's interrupting her studies, despite the fact that she admits later on in the game during a conversation that she wouldn't be nearly as advanced or powerful in attack magic or healing magic had she not come along with you. So she begrudgingly admits that this was a good learning experience for her, but she doesn't want to go in the first place. Plus she gets to run into the blind zombie mage, Nazim, who is... Nazim is the guy from Skyrim. It does start with N, but I can't quite remember it right now. Goddamn you, Jack Daniels. And there's Arturo, is the big dumb tank that I mentioned previously. I could not tell you the jester's name to save my life, save that it starts with a T. And I can't remember the name of the other rogue, but I do remember that she's a sultry redhead in a green dress who is very aggressively trying to get into your pants because she realizes that being adopted by the king, you have a chance of being in line despite being an adoptive son. And you do find out at the end of the game, again, 20-year-old spoiler, that you're not his adopted son, you're his bastard son.
That's why you're adopted.
Yep. And you do wind up beating out your younger brother, the legitimate Prince Sheridan, as being the appointed heir simply by virtue of the fact that when it becomes apparent that you're a wildling with no true name, he spends a great deal of time trying to hunt you down, and the king feels that this is dishonorable since you were raised to be brothers as you were actually brothers.
Nice.
So yeah, kind of memorable characters. Like I can remember King Toxamon, the Mirari king, who tells you, "Sure, go kill the goblins. We got this." I can vaguely remember the wizard Catawin, who is the one who is supposed to be able to give you the true name, and is killed by monsters because you get shipwrecked. And there's the witch in the woods, Oriana, who saves you from the poisoning. It turns out to be your mother, although it's never really explained why the king was hooking up with some forest witch. And
yes,
she's
you do.
Like creepy forest witch with no pupils in her eyes kind of stuff. Like your character is legitimately scared of her when he wakes up.
Maybe she had pupils back in the day. Maybe she was something back in the day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I guess let's bring it around to this. Would you recommend this today?
If you have a working N64, and if you have the graphic expansion pack, and if you have a long time or a lot of hours to kill, because this is a very slow-paced, slow-grind game. A very, what's the phrase? Slow burn. It builds up to a lot of big epic set pieces, but you gotta let it get there. If that sounds like your kind of thing, by all means. If you want fast-paced explosions all over the place that aren't for comedy relief, with a... You are not going to make Windows better.
Every time.
You really are not. Then this really isn't the game for you. So there are some people I would recommend this to. There are some people I wouldn't. But as I said, it's a cult classic for a reason.
Yeah. And you said that kind of garnered poor reviews when it came out?
When it first came out, the professional reviews were pretty bad. I think Metacritic gave it something like 53%. IGN pegged it at 47%. It wasn't looked on favorably by the pros. But the pros are the same ones that are telling us that, Final Fantasy with schoolgirls and giant guns are a good thing.
Right.
Or flying cars.
Yeah. I don't know.
You can tell he's too drunk, otherwise he'd have had a good counter for that.
Final Fantasy 15 is its own beast. I mean, I'd have
probably been fine with it had they not called it Final Fantasy. I
have a very love-hate relationship. That's a different video, and maybe I'll go off on that at some point here. It's maybe we'll pull the pin on that. I don't know. It's had time to sit. I can reflect on it. But Aidyn Chronicles, N64.
As you can tell by the name, it was meant to be a trilogy originally, and it never got that way because underwhelming sales. One, the reviews tanked it, and this was before internet word of mouth was really a thing. But two, it was just a rare title to begin with. A lot of places didn't carry it. I happened to look out.
I've never seen it, so
yeah. This was way back when Sears was still carrying video games. That I happened to find a copy of it and went, "Hey, RPG for the N64."
It's like when I got my copy of Skater Die from Woolworths.
Very similar.
Yeah. But
except Aidyn was actually a good game.
Right. Skater Die was not a good game. But, anyways, we're cutting this kind of long, so
we knew we were going to.
With that, good night, good gaming. We'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed what you saw.
Let us know. Give us a like and a comment down below.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to make sure you get all notifications from us.
And as always,
good night
and good gaming.